This is Housebound. I'm Chris.
I'm Holly.
I'm Ashlyn.
I'm Greg.
And you're invited.
Welcome to Housebound, a podcast we made because we needed company. In it, we talk about things that are on our minds, and today we are talking about universal basic income. Baby! Who's heard of this before? Anybody?
I've heard of it, but I haven't really seen it applied that I can think of.
Like in real life, or like people talking about applying it?
No, like in real life. Like other than CERB, which was a quasi-example, I don't think I've ever looked at an example where it was actually used.
Yeah, okay. So I did just a little bit of research for it because I wanted to sound like I was knowledgeable. But just as a caveat before we start, I am not an economist, and I'm fairly certain that y'all are not economists. And so the direction of this is going to be fairly opinionated of what we think. Mm-hmm. Just for all of our listeners out there that are like, that's not you didn't think about these things. Yes, we won't think about all the things.
I feel like that's most of our episodes are
that's
mostly
fair.
I think we have to categorize them as opinion, not expert fact.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, I have heard of it. I don't remember what country it was. I'm guessing it has something to do with one of the Scandinavian countries. Probably implemented it because that seems like the kind of thing that they would be on top of.
Yes, they are lovely.
And so I have heard of it being implemented. I don't remember how long the pilot program for it was, though. I want to say it was maybe like a year or two, but that seems really long. But that might be the minimum it would take to actually see if it works. So I don't know. I have heard of it, and I know that it has been tested in the world.
In the world. Greg, are you familiar?
I have heard of it. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. So, universal basic income, just for anybody that isn't aware, is defined as a governmental program in which every adult citizen receives a set amount of money on a regular basis. So, there's a lot of flexibility in what that could be. The actual definition says citizen, which would limit who is getting it. You would have to be an actual citizen of the country. And it just says a set amount of money and on a regular basis. So usually what people talk about when they're talking about UBI, universal basic income, is an amount usually around $1,000 to $1,500 per month. And there are lots of different reasons for that, but it's easiest for people to think about per month because that's what I think is easiest. So that's what I'm going to talk about.
Well, and I assume that $1,000 to $1,500 per month would is that I know that exchange rates are completely different, but then is that just $1,000 to $1,500 currency, dollars or whatever the dollar value of a currency is? Because in some countries there's 15 million whatevers equal $1 Canadian.
Yeah.
So it obviously can't be 1,000 to 1,500 of those whatevers, because then that would be pennies per month, right? So
that's fair.
I'm assuming this is a US Canada kind of value.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
then?
you are correct. But it would depend significantly on cost of living of the place. So
oh, sure. Yeah.
The actual point of UBI is to cover the basic cost of living. That's why people want to implement it. And so if your basic cost of living is 8,000 dinero, wherever you are. Rupees, yes. Zelda. Then you would need to have your UBI at 8,000 or something close to it, so that you could actually cover the basic cost of living. So here,
I think, and I just want to touch on something you just said, but I think what you were thinking of was De Niro, and having 8,000 Robert De Niros would be just way too much talent for the world. So
I'm speechless. That was such a bad joke.
thanks. I'll be here all podcast.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Anyways, so since we are on cost of living, what do you guys think that the average cost of living is? And I looked at several places in Canada, but let's just go with Saskatoon because we all live in Saskatoon. So what do you think the average cost of living in Saskatoon is?
Is that like the average amount that someone spends on their like monthly bills?
Right. So this includes utilities, and it includes travel expenses. So usually this calculation includes either gas and like owning a car or public transportation. Like you don't do both in this calculation. It will also include the necessities. So like food necessities, they won't include like chips or whatever in the grocery bill. It will be bread, eggs, milk, like the actual staples that you would need to actually make your food, which like Chris and I barely ever do. So our food calculations are usually like, oh, skip the dishes.
Just throwing us under the bus at the top of the episode.
Chris and Holly spend $1.58 per month
on groceries because it all goes to Skip. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and cost of living often doesn't include rent, but I actually went and looked at what the average rent was for a single bedroom place as well, just so that I could put them together and we could just talk about one number. So the number that I have includes all of that cost of living and also includes a 1-bedroom apartment. And we're just talking about for a single adult individual, no school happening at the same time or anything like that.
No dependents, no spouses or partners kind of thing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna. Oh man, I think that
it's hard. It's hard to think of it for just one person.
Oh,
right?
Totally. Yeah. Especially because I'm married, so everything I think of is for 2 people. But I would guess that rent for a single person apartment in Saskatoon, like not bottom of the barrel, nothing near the tippity top, would be somewhere around, I want to say $700 a month. You can definitely get rent for cheaper, but then you need to get multiple bedrooms and split the cost between roommates.
So you want us to come up with a number of the overall amount for cost of living, right?
Right. I can break it down for you too, though, if you want to know rent, because that will be interesting.
We got to have the full challenge. The full challenge. The whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do the whole amount. Yeah.
I'm just going to say, I'll just throw out 1,100 out there, but yeah.
I think that, see, I still keep thinking of it from like a 2-person perspective minimum. So if I assume that you can't evenly cut it in half, like I know that you can't just say, oh, I pay this much with 2 people, so half of it is what I would pay with 1, because that's not really how renting works. Like you can get a better place for just a couple of $100 more. So cutting the rental price in half doesn't work like that. I hesitate to say something that I feel like is as low as what Greg said, but I do think that it's like 1,300 is probably like 11, like he said, to 1,300 is probably where we're sitting at. I want to say 2,000, but that's what I feel like it is for 2 people. So
yeah, I think I'm gonna go right in the middle and say 1,200.
Okay,
but one thing I'm curious about is you have to make sure that cell phones and home internet are included in those those bills, because nowadays that is necessary.
Yeah.
It's hard to get around in the world without that.
So I went onto the website Numbeo, NUMBEO.com, and that's a crowdsourced global database. So the data is a little lopsided depending on how many people have answered for the particular city. But the average rent, let me break it down for you first,
Okay.
and then I'll give you the actual number. The average rent of a 1-bedroom apartment in Saskatoon is $1,035.
Whoa.
Good gosh.
Yeah.
That's average.
That's average. So, but the lowest reported was $940. Now, I know that you can get a rented apartment for, a 1-bedroom apartment, because we've looked into this, for like $740. If you want a bachelor's, you can maybe get it for $595, something like that.
Yeah.
But for a 1-bedroom apartment, that's what they're reporting the average as.
Oh,
Okay.
Is 1,000.
Okay.
I feel that I know people who have gotten it for lower. They just didn't report it. So,
Right. And so
Yeah.
like we're going to have a little bit of,
a little skewed,
wiggle
but that's
room
okay. Yeah.
on this. But on average, like I went to some of the cities on this site and they reported when they didn't think that they had enough data. They were like, we can't give you numbers for this. Please enter in your numbers if you already live here, because we don't have good data for it.
Yeah.
So they have a minimum of what they think is good for data. So if that's what's being reported in Saskatoon, that's fair. I've looked at some of the apartments that are like $740.
Oh man.
They're not good.
No.
like I wouldn't live there. Yeah. Anyways, so $1,035 is for rent, and then for cost of living, and they have it all broken out into like price of bread, price of like every single little thing, is $1,152. So
over 2,000.
the overall cost of living in Saskatoon is $2,187. So
Wow.
$2,187. So that means
Crap.
That means people are splurging on their grocery bill.
on their groceries?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think the reason why I'm a little skewed is because when I was living with my 2 other brothers, for like the 3 of us, we had like a very small grocery bill, like monthly cost per month. Like I can't remember the exact number, but like we were only throwing maybe like 50 or under each month into that bill. Like it was
Each?
Yeah. So
Were you eating like ramen?
Yeah,
No.
what did you eat?
we just like A, bought stuff on sale, and B, didn't buy like expensive fruit and vegetable. Like we'd like pick the cheap stuff, you know?
I think it was
So-
closer to $100 a month that you guys were putting in.
Each?
I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think it was 300 in total.
Because like $50 per week for groceries is more realistic.
No,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we had like it was minuscule. I'm gonna message my brothers and see if any of them reply by the end of this episode.
Sure. Do it.
That's fair. And I mean, you can eat really, really simply. If you do eat ramen for lunch and supper, I've done this calculation previously, but I don't remember if I'm exactly right, but you can eat only ramen for lunch and supper every day and only spend like $7 a month. But then also your sodium intake has skyrocketed and you have to go to the
a
hospital.
significant calorie deficit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and you have heart issues.
Yeah. So if you
But you don't have to pay for it because free healthcare.
yeah, or mostly free healthcare. So that's one of the other things that they put in.
Yeah,
like,
caveat.
yeah, like 70% of our healthcare is free, like all of the normal things, but they do put in a small cost just for if you have to get like a prescription that isn't covered, or dentistry or vision, or but yeah, cost of living is quite high. So
That's ridiculous.
yeah, and Saskatoon obviously is not the highest in our country. So
No.
so I checked out Vancouver and Toronto because they're always the big ones that you hear about, and they are both sitting just under and just over $3,000 per month.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Edmonton and Winnipeg are both sitting around $2,100 as well. So they're
Okay.
really comparable to Saskatoon. So like I just thought that was really interesting, that like, not to give too much away about what I make during a month, but net, what I bring in, like, that's pretty even to what the cost of living is.
Yeah.
It's like, if I was a person living on my own and not sharing rent costs, that would be really difficult to make payments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So universal basic income is something that economists have suggested would make that a lot easier for people and give people the freedom to have their basic needs covered, but still encourage people to work. So one of the biggest cons with this idea is that, oh, well, if basic needs are covered, then people just won't work.
Right.
And then you'll have a whole bunch of unemployment.
Yeah.
People that are just abusing the system, essentially.
Right. Which, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that that's what I would do, because I want stuff.
So one of the things that I've thought of before when having discussions about universal basic income is that question of, like, if you have, like, regardless of what the actual numbers are, if you're bringing in per month from the government enough money to, like, have your basic expenses covered without needing a job to fund yourself, basically, what is the Christian response to that? You know, if you could quit your job and still have all of your expenses covered, then you have so much more time to give to more valuable causes, or help out in the community, or volunteer, or all of these different sorts of things. And so it switches. It's a curious question that I have as to, as a Christian in that space, what would be the most valuable or smartest decision, and what would the church recommend that its members choose to do? To quit their jobs and start volunteering full time, or to that work is a valuable virtue to have, and they should keep at their jobs. That's a question that mulls around in my mind.
Well, and that's an interesting outlook, because all of my research and, like, listening to podcasts about this and all of that is very secular based. It's very much like, people need to work. We don't want to just be paying for people to just sit around and do nothing. And so generally the answer is, well, we won't cover all of cost of living, then we will give people $1,500 instead of $2,000, so that they still need to work, but have the freedom to maybe, like, go to school while they work, or take care of a dependent while they work, or something like that. But as a part of the Christian community, like, you would have time to volunteer, and that would be doing something for the community.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about how the delivery of said funds to the populace would work, and kind of what restrictions they're talking about when they bring up the idea, like restrictions on, like, who gets it and how often they get it, or who qualifies is what I mean by who gets it. But I suspect that it's not a situation of, and I guess you would get into, like, a gray area about, like, how this would be hard to prove or hard to enforce, but I suspect it wouldn't be as simple as, if you don't want to have a job, we'll give you money. And so I wouldn't, just from my thoughts, like, right off the top of my head, I wouldn't encourage believers to just simply say, okay, quit my job and take the money that the government would give me, because I feel like that would be abusing the system. The system isn't set up to, like, give people free rides when they feel like they want to have free rides. It's literally set up to help people that are, like, unable to meet that threshold currently, because, you know, if they have a job but it's not enough, then it can get them up off their feet. I also suspect that once a person starts making a certain amount of money within a certain, I'm assuming, income tax year, then that supplement that the government gives would be removed from them because they would be no longer in need of it, because I can't imagine that they would just be able to rise up through the ranks in a job and still be recipients of this fund, you know? Like, it's not like they're just going to get it forever and ever and ever. At least that's, like, I'm thinking of it in the sense of, are they going to give it to every single person in the country? Just that's it. You're in the country, you're literally just a citizen and you get it, and it doesn't matter how much you make a year, you're just always going to get it? Or is it like the people that need it are the ones that will qualify for it? Those people will get the basic income that they need until they can get on their feet again. And then essentially they'll be, it sounds crass, but they'll be cut loose. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like, I feel like those are maybe two different scenarios that have probably popped up on people's radar, because the discussion probably went, how do we help those that are in need, to, well, people are going to complain. The people that aren't in need are going to complain. And so how do we stop them from complaining? Well, we turn it into everybody gets some, and then nobody should be able to complain. But you know that there's still going to be people complaining, right? People are still going to say those people aren't worth it. They're not putting in their effort, you know? And so the government will have to make some kind of a regulation for that, I imagine, right?
I feel though that like we're talking from the mindset of a consumeristic market-based culture, but universal income might impact what the landscape looks like and what is assumed to be the norm. So I think I think it's tough to predict and figure out what that's going to look like. But like, Holly, what sort of, like, in your research, what did you come across in terms of what the format of this universal basic income, like, how is it dished out? What sort of, like, does it just kind of incorporate into our landscape the way it is, or does it shift it, or like what? Yeah.
So it's like Chris was saying, it's widely debated.
Yeah.
And it has been tried in a few different countries, very specifically in, I don't remember which one, but a Scandinavian country, like Chris was saying.
Nice.
They did this awesome experiment that went on for, I think it was actually 5 years. And
oh wow,
and
yeah.
They took an entire town, big enough to be a good sample size, because they do this great experiment-based government in whatever country it was that I'm forgetting. Anyways, and they took an entire town and just gave them $1,000 or level with $1,000 of our money each month.
I think we're maybe thinking of the same situation, because I remember hearing about how there was regulations against just like giving money for no good reason from the government, because it's the government and it can't just like be seen to like favor certain people. And so there was like specific laws that had to be written or amendments written in to allow this town to be given the money in the first place, which was totally mind-boggling, but they went ahead and did it.
Yeah, they went ahead and changed their constitution so that it could incorporate this experiment, because they wanted to know if this was going to be better for their people. So that was really interesting.
Cool, yeah.
But yeah, they gave it to everybody, and they gave it for 5 years, and they said, like, no restrictions. Everybody gets 1,000 every month. How does it change their lives? And so the study was largely positive. There were people who were able to wait on jobs. They wanted to work, but they wanted to wait and get a job that would actually make them happy to go to, or to get a wage that they were actually happy with, that they felt reflected their capabilities and education. And the extra $1,000 per month was exactly what they needed to be able to do that. There were also individuals that were able to take work and pare it down to what they felt they were capable with, so that they could take care of their dependents. There were a few older style dependents and kids and all of that kind of thing. And then there were also freeloaders, as you would say. There were absolutely people who just wanted to be cared for, and that's it. They didn't want anything else more with life. And like that's really interesting. Like, and the welfare programs that we have in Canada and like the States have, they are built with a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of attempts to help people who need help and who can prove that they need help. But the idea of something like this is to just simplify it and say, those people need help, and it would be really nice for even middle-class people to have a little bit of help, especially with the amount of debt that there is in the country. So we'll just give it to everybody. And then they get into the conversation, well, maybe if you're over a certain tax bracket, then you don't get it, but the middle class and people under poverty do get it, or maybe just under poverty, or like, yeah, it's a whole thing about how to stratify the program, because it's got a lot of different facets.
Mm-hmm. We know that finding the right music or background effect for your video, or even the perfect intro jingle to your new podcast, is very important. That's why we'd recommend you take a look at soundstripe.com. It's a music licensing site, sound effect archive, and stock footage library all rolled into one. With a great selection of genres and artists, curated playlists for easy browsing, and much more, Soundstripe takes the hassle out of music licensing with one-time fees and its more than generous selection of beats, sounds, and video clips. Make your next creative project a hit. Check it out today and receive 10% off your first monthly or annual subscription when you use the promo code Housebound10 at checkout. That's Housebound10. Go get creative!
I feel like that that if something like this was brought into place, it could have ramifications in different areas. Like as you were talking, I was thinking, like, if people are waiting for a workplace that would make them happy, that would cause negative workplaces to have to put pressure on creating better environments, for their workers to work in. And it's not just like, well, this is like, we're going to get employees no matter what, because people need jobs and stuff like that, right? And so we can have the most negative environment where people are super sad every time they leave work, and and it's just hostile and all of this, but they need a job, and so that's why that's okay. And whereas it puts that pressure to actually, like, I guess I feel it would reinvent, at least in certain work environments, the workplace, and put pressure to make your place desirable over others. So
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, and education too. Like, if I wanted to take like a year off to go and educate myself so that I can go back to my job and be paid more because I now have the education that I need in order to be paid more, or get a different job in order to be paid more, or whatever, to bring my life up. Like, that's a middle class issue largely, although it could bring somebody out of poverty as well if they could actually get the education or training that they need in order to do that. And then their life can be significantly better afterwards.
And then that would probably change the politics of the work environment for some of those companies or businesses that will offer to pay for upgrading and things like that for you. I wonder if that would change the way that they would operate, and it would be more of a, we'll allow you to take a year off if you want to do this, as opposed to we have to shell out for it. So then there's a bunch of different like give and takes where organizations that used to support people in a certain way would no longer have to support them in that way. And so I'm thinking of things like, if you got a basic income and you were able to find, I know it's not as easy and as straightforward as this, but if you got a basic income and you were able to find basic housing and basic food, what would that do for the homeless population in cities or towns or wherever you live? Like, would that actually eradicate it? I know it's really hard to get a house to live in, so I'm not assuming that it would. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, would that solve that problem essentially? And then would all of those outreach businesses or charities or people that work with like soup kitchens and stuff like that, would they divert their focus to other things, or would there still be a need for that? Because, like you said, if it is, we won't give a minimum, we'll like if we won't give the bare minimum of 2,100 that they need, we'll give them 1,500 and they'll have to make work to make up that extra minimum of 600, etc. Like, will there still be a need for these services then? So that's a very interesting ebb and flow to some of the
effects that we'll see.
Yeah.
There's a project called the New Leaf Project that was started here in Canada. It's essentially a project where they give someone who is homeless or in like dire need or whatever a lump sum payment of like $7,500, and then they just essentially track the bank account, and then they check in with them every so often. Let me see if I can actually find like more information about it. But they essentially check in with them for like a year and see how are they doing. Mm-hmm. And they found that giving these people that payment was enough to help them like get out of the rut that they were in, you know, and actually like start to kind of get their foot on the ground. And because oftentimes you just sort of get stuck in a rut. And so, yeah, they like did 115 participants last time. And yeah, they checked in with them after 1, 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. And essentially like across the board, pretty well over average, everybody like improved their like spending, their housing, their food security, like all across the board. And so I think something like universal income could help with sort of giving a boost. I think it's a little different than the lump sum payment, because I think that sort of helps you with just like right off the bat being able to start doing things and like getting into proper housing like right away, and you know, and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's interesting how giving away free money has been now like it's documented where it has been able to like get people who are in like homeless situations out of that. It's not just like they the stereotype of, well, if I give them something, they're just going to spend that on their addictions, or you know, or they're just going to keep on making the same patterns, and they're not going to spend the money wisely or whatever. But it's actually like this is proving that that if we entrust them with something, they can actually do something about it. So
well, and I think it's important to remember that some people will just take it and spend it on their addictions. But if you look at the population of homeless in your city, I haven't done this, but you can look at the breakdown of why are they homeless? Are they homeless because they're trying to get out of their abusive home? Are they homeless because they lost their job and just can't find another one because they lost their home and they need an address to get a job? Are they homeless because they have an addiction? Are they homeless because they've been in prison and they can't find a job as a felon? Like, there are tons of reasons to be homeless. And so if you have 4 out of the 5 of those reasons that I just mentioned, likely you're going to use the opportunity to get out of your situation because you don't want to be there because it was something unfortunate that happened to you, or maybe some bad choices, but you understand that you don't want to make those choices again.
The question becomes, do we focus on the few people that we feel like or even know for a fact will be that freeloader? Does that outweigh the benefit that it could do to everybody else?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. It's a cost benefit situation, which any of the economists that I listen to on podcasts would be like, yeah, she got something from our podcast. Because that's really what it is. And it's not a financial cost benefit. It's a well-being cost benefit, which puts me like firmly on the side of, yes, please let us do this, because it will raise so many more people up than it will keep where they are. And even in our lives, like, what would you do if you never had to pay rent again because the government was paying for your rent? Right? Like,
I mean, right off the bat, there's loans that I could pay off probably within like a year or two of not paying rent. But after that, I don't know. Like, I would just have more money. So maybe I would give it away. Maybe I would go on more trips. Maybe like,
or be able to own a home, or be able to have kids or be able to go and start a business or like, you know, like there's so many possibilities even for middle class. And like, I don't know. That's me. I'm like firmly on the side of universal basic income.
Yeah.
Noted.
I definitely agree with you, Ollie, that I think it's a good idea. But I'm still interested in that question of like the church's response to universal basic income. And I on that question, I personally would lean closer to the side of maybe consider in a situation where you have enough money coming in to cover your basic needs and you don't need anything else. I would lean a little bit closer to the side of, depending on the situation, maybe consider quitting your job and doing something else with your time. And particularly something else that would still benefit the community.
Right. Yeah.
You know, where you can pick and choose something that might be more valuable to the community, might be do more good for justice in the community, or, you know, bringing those like fruits of the spirit to your neighbors and your community around you, that maybe your job just doesn't have that ability to do. I would challenge people to consider that if universal basic income was a thing, but it's mostly just a thought experiment, I think, at this point. Do you know if any country is planning on implementing it, Holly?
I don't know any that have gone fully for like covering all basic income. Most are a little bit frightened of the idea of having a lot of unemployed people just milling about, I think.
Suitably so, yeah.
Yeah, and I mostly know of experiments that have been done, but anybody listening out there, if you know of anybody or any countries that have implemented something like universal basic income, or are planning to, let us know, because I'd be super interested to know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I think it's tough to like talk about all of this from the mindset that we have of like a market consumer driven culture, where like positions are made in companies oftentimes just to like bring in more work, or you know, or yeah, like I don't know, or just to mass produce more stuff. I don't know. Like it's interesting. I don't know what this would end up doing, but I feel it would end up causing companies that are more based on fluff and don't actually like do anything other than just sort of like are a part of the economy just to another gear in the turn. Like I don't know what this would do to that. Again, I'm not an economist. It's just all hypothetical. And I just have a feeling that this would cause a drastic mental shift in how people think. Or like Chris was saying, we would essentially like force this like universal basic income into an economy, like our own economy's mindset, and not necessarily let it transform us, but like transform it to kind of fit into our structure, so it doesn't actually necessarily change the landscape too much. So, and yeah, I don't know how that would impact, but I think it would cause it so that people, aren't able to be freeloaders, but also maybe aren't able to be creative or to reach out and do stuff. You know, if we say you have to have a job in order to qualify or be eligible or something, right? So,
I think putting a caveat like you have to have a job in order to qualify would probably negate a lot of the awesome things that we just talked about. But and we might not want to get into it because it will probably spark something a little bit long, but
but I'll talk about it anyway.
Just really briefly, there are cons that relate to what you're talking about, Greg, that some people think that there will be a large demand in goods that are fluff. So then it would cause inflation because this demand is just so much higher because people have extra income to spend.
Okay.
On the other hand, that would really stimulate the economy, and then there would be more jobs because you would need more people to go and make the things that people want.
Assuming they're environments that people want to be in to work, right?
Like it's really like unsure about what it would actually do to, like, what will it do to the cost of living if, like, will that just go up and then it will be a moot thing that you're getting this money because everyone will need it in order to survive regardless.
It's almost like the economy is cyclical or something. I don't know. Just riffing off the top of my head here.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but largely those are the three biggest cons with this, that they think maybe it will cause inflation, that the inflation might cancel out the point of the UBI in the first place, and that there might be a lower incentive to work. So, like, those are the three biggest things. So if we could, like, if our economists, not me, if our economists can come up with a way to implement it in which those things are really low risk, then, like, let's do it.
Yeah. I feel like this kind of reminds me of like what like Google has done, where I remember listening to some sort of a talk where they were talking about how maybe it was like Thursday afternoons they set aside so that you could work on like whatever you want, any project you want. You just like there's no mandate necessarily from Google, but just work on something that could potentially be a software item or some sort of a project that could be used in Google and implemented and benefited. And so, but what that did is that did generate a lot of like creative out of the box thinking that has brought about. And I don't know what the exact products are because I haven't done my research. I'm just riffing off of a talk that I listened to 5 years ago. But essentially what that did is it allowed it so that people could be creative and could really push themselves to do something that they maybe was out of their comfort zone because they knew there was no risk. They would it would either work or it wouldn't. And so something like universal basic income could cause people to take those risks, be creative, be innovative, bring about new technology, bring about something that could actually like help society, like for example, somebody like Elon Musk or whatever, who has a bunch of like income and has a bunch of obviously like time, is able to do weird stuff like work on self-driving cars and send rockets into space, things that could potentially and take risks. And obviously, sometimes those risks don't quite work out. Like I think that armored car or something that he like shot some bullets at, that it was definitely not bulletproof or something.
Yeah.
So, things like that. But I feel that this could help generate some really cool things.
We don't do a lot of things because you might fail. And that the risk of failure right now is possibly the risk of becoming homeless or not being able to eat that month, or because most of us are not financially free. And so if you are a little bit financially more free, you could take the risk to fail a little bit more. And yeah, we could see a lot more innovation. Or people, like Ashlyn was saying, just feeling like they have the freedom in order to help others or in order to make the world better however they can, because they don't need to go and do the grind of work. Or at least don't need to go and do the grind of work as often.
Yeah.
But
maybe it's a good idea to have other countries in other areas of the world be the ones that play test this idea, because I'm not so sure that North America could handle it.
You try it out. Tell us how it worked.
Oh, yeah. Come on. Canadians? Like, that would be the most Canadian thing to do, would be to test something out like this in the world's landscape, being generous with our money. Come on.
I don't know how generous Canada actually is with its money.
But we're thought of to be very kind in the landscape of the world. This would be a kind thing to do.
And it's the thought that counts.
Yeah.
Or at least polite. Maybe not kind.
Yeah, whether or not we've earned that, I don't know.
Yeah. Respectfully, you're a freeloader.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So that was universal basic income. And if you want to tell us about what your thoughts and opinions are on it, we would love to hear from you. You can contact us at anchor.fm/housebound, and you can leave a voice recording there for us, or you can get a hold of us via Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Or you can email at us at thehouseboundpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is the houseboundpodcast@gmail.com. Please email at us. We would like to hear from you.
Please, we're so lonely.